we're going to explore a special type of linear equation called point-slope form. We're going to look at what it is and also how to graph a line if we are given an equation in point-slope form. So this is what point-slope form looks like. It's y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Some of these pieces in this equation may look familiar, and that's a good thing. They should. M represents our slope, just like it did when we had our slope-intercept form. x1, y1 is a point on the line. And y and x are just variables. Y and x here are variables just like when we had the equation y equals mx plus b. M represented our slope, b represented y-intercept, and x and y were just variables. When we would see an equation in slope-intercept form like this, m would be a number, b would be a number, and these would just stay x and y. The same kind of thing is going to happen with point-slope form. This is going to be a number, this is going to be a number, this will be a number, and x and y will just stay x and y. So for example, you may have an equation that looks like y minus 5 equals 3 times x minus 4. Here, we would have x and y values that give us a point on our line, and our slope would be 3. But let's take a closer look at that. If I had y minus 3 equals 2 times x minus 4. So this is in point-slope form, and I know because I've got y minus something equals something times x minus something. It looks just like this, except there's numbers here, here, and here. The first thing I'm going to want to do is identify my slope and a point on my line. The best way to do that is by always rewriting your form right above this equation, and then it's very easy to see the pieces that line up. So the first piece I'm going to look for is m. So here, 2 is in the place of m. So my slope is 2. I'm going to want to write it as 2 over 1 only because it's going to help me graphing, because it's easy to tell what my rise over run is. But the slope is 2. When I write that as a fraction, I can write that as 2 over 1. Now I'm going to look for my x and y values. Every ordered pair is x comma y. And I know that I'm looking for x1 and y1. Here, 4 is my x1, and here 3 is in place of y1. So the point that's on my line is 4, 3. You may be asking yourself, why is it positive 4? Because this looks like a negative 4. And this is a positive 3 when this looks like negative 3. But you need to look back at the form. The form is x minus an x1 value. So you have to ask yourself, well, what am I subtracting? I'm taking away a positive 4. So I have positive 4 here. And here I'm taking away a positive 3. So I have a value of 3 here. The trick for point-slope form and identifying your point is you're going to take the opposite of whatever you see here and here. So this looks like negative 4, the opposite of that, positive 4. This looks like negative 3, the opposite is positive 3. So now I'm going to take that information and I'm going to use it to graph my line. So I'm just going to rewrite my slope was 2 over 1 and my point was 4, 3. So I'm going to plot my point 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to do rise over run, up 2 over 1. I might do it one more time just so that my line is straight. And then you're going to take a ruler and draw your line. Okay? And that's how you can graph a line using point-slope form. Let's try another one. let's say we had y plus 6 equals negative x minus 1. So here, this is a little bit trickier, but I'm going to take the same steps. I'm first going to look for my slope, and then I'm going to look for my x1 and y1. So my slope, here, I don't have a number in place of m, I just have a minus sign. So there is a number here, they just didn't write it. It's negative 1. Anytime there's just a minus sign, it's negative 1. So my slope is negative 1, and I want to write it so that it's rise over run. So I'm going to write negative 1 over 1 for my rise over run. The next thing I'm going to do is look for my x1 and y1. So here, what value is in place of x1? A 1. And remember, I'm going to take the opposite of what I see. So this looks like negative 1, but really it's a positive 1. And now my y1. Well, here I have 6 in place of y1. But instead of a minus sign, there's a plus here. And I'm going to take the opposite of whatever I see. So it looks like plus 6, so I'm going to take minus 6. So now I've identified my slope and a point on the line, and I can use those pieces to graph my line. So I'm going to write my slope is negative 1 over 1, and my point is 1, negative 6. So I'm going to go 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's my starting point. Now my slope is negative 1. When I'm doing rise over run, I'm going to rise negative 1. So that means I'm going to go down 1. And then my denominator is positive 1. So that means I'm going to run positive 1. And that would be my next point. I'm going to do that a few more times so that my line is nice and straight. And then you would take a ruler and connect your points, and that would be your line. I'm going to double check to make sure the slope of my line is reasonable. If I were to look at this line, this should be a negative slope. And when I look at my slope, I do have a negative slope. My slope is negative 1. So that's how you can take something in point slope form, identify the slope, a point on the line, and use that information to graph the line.